Sure I do. Joyce. Thank you. First I want to say, I didn't hear the rule about comedy. So my story is, I hope it's entertaining, but it's not a comedy. In fact, it's a serious life lesson story that I hope will impart good advice to you. I want to tell you also that when I was in my 30s, I used to tell stories for a living, and I used to worry about getting halfway through a story and realizing that I'd forgotten to tell some important details. So I have a little index card that I could look at just in case, but that's against the rules. And now I'm in my 60s, and I'm concerned about forgetting the entire topic. So I have 2 words written on my hand just in case I forget the topic. There are any number of ways that we can find ourselves leaving work abruptly. One of them is we could quit. We can go in and say halfway through the day, take this job and shove it, I am out of here, and stomp out. Which, if you've ever done that, you know it's a very delicious thing. You can also get laid off. That's when they still like you, they like your work, they like you, they wish they could keep you, but it's the economy, you've got to go now. And then you can get fired. That's when they don't like you, and they don't like your work, and they want you to leave immediately and never come back, and they wish you hadn't been there in the first place. How many of you have ever been fired? I've been fired twice, and I want to tell you how that happened, and one of the stories has a good piece of advice with it. I've been self-employed most of my work life, and for a number of years I wrote corporate training, and this was back before computers and online training really took off, and so a lot of the training was delivered live, and so I delivered it often as well. So one time I got a gig teaching employee team building at a Ford assembly plant up near Detroit. And the first thing they told me was, I had a little Honda Civic at the time. They said, you better not drive your Honda Civic up there and park it by the assembly plant, or when you come out, all the windows will be smashed. So I rented a Ford and I drove back. And I don't know what assembly plants are like now, but what they were like then was huge. They're like a whole town. You'd go there and there'd just be roads with these huge buildings, and each building would be like 13F and 11-9, and you'd find your building. So I found my building, and I went in, and it was huge inside. That it was all one giant room, and the ceiling was 3 stories tall, and there were these huge lines of really big machines that were really dangerous and noisy and dusty and dirty. And if you fell in them, you would be crushed immediately and no one would even notice. And lights were flashing, and it was really, really noisy. And amongst those lines of machines, in just a couple places, there were these little stacks of rooms. Now remember, the ceiling is 3 stories tall, but there would be these 2-story stacks of just one room on top of the other, like about 16 feet square. And the bottom room was bathrooms, and the top room was the break room for the shift workers, the line workers. And that's where I was supposed to teach. And the way you got upstairs was go on a metal stairway that walked along the outside wall of the bathroom story until you get upstairs. When you get upstairs, the floor is metal, and the walls are really heavy chain link fence. So basically you're in a little cage up there, and you're looking out over, down into these giant machines. So it's really noisy up there, and it's really hot. And it's 5 minutes to 7 in the morning, because the day shift starts at 7 o'clock, and that's when my training is supposed to start. And I get up there, and there's these metal picnic tables there, and there's about 20 guys at the table. And there are various tables. And in some ways they're very different, in some ways they are the same. They're different in that they're quite a range in age, and they are quite a mix racially, but they all kind of have the same body type. They got really barrel chests and big thick arms and big thick hands, calloused hands, and grease under their fingernails. And a lot of them have guts that hang over their bellies. And there's no women. And I look at them, and they look at me, and I have long blonde straight hair, dangly earrings, wireless glasses, and rosy cheeks. And we look at each other. Now I want to tell you a couple things before I tell you what happens in the training. One is that In all the training I did all those years, whether it was blue collar or white collar, unless it was a hospital staff, it was almost all men. There'd be, if there were 30 people, there'd be 3 women, 2 women. That's how it was back then in lots of places in the work world. This particular group, it was all guys. The other thing I want to tell you is that during the writing phase, I cannot tell you how many times the client came to me and said, let's put in a football exercise. We could have them break into small groups, and then they'll pick somebody to be the quarterback, and then this will happen, and that'll happen, they'll have to figure out this, and they'll learn something from it. And I would write it, because that's what the client wanted. I'd figure out some way to get a football exercise in there, but it would make me mad, because I would think about those women and know that if we can generalize, football is more of a guy's thing than a women's thing, and that women were the minority in a lot of work settings, and this was just one more way that women were going to have to stretch a little farther to be one of the guys at work. So I didn't like these football exercises, but I did them anyway, and then the women in the groups did it. Okay, so now it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and the training starts. Now, when I had been writing this training, I had gotten a brilliant idea to put in a cooking exercise. The only time I did this, I don't remember what they were supposed to learn from it, or what the exercise was exactly, but I do remember it involved a recipe for apple raisin pie. So, we start the training, we do the first session, which involves the apple raisin pie. It's the break. All the guys go someplace to smoke, so you know it was a number of years ago, because they all went someplace to smoke. Pretty darn soon, the shift supervisor comes up to me and he says, "You're fired." He said the guys had come up to him right as soon as grade started and said, "We can't relate to her, she can't relate to us, she made us do a cooking exercise, we refuse to learn from her, we're fired." So I left. And I'm driving my little Ford off of the assembly plant lot, and at first I'm mad, and then I think, all right, I accept this, it's a lesson learned. If you want to teach a group of people, you got to teach within their culture, not within your own culture, and I just called it a lesson learned, and that's the first time I was fired. But it did make me mad, all those football exercises, and they couldn't even handle one cooking exercise.